Good day, everyone. I am Joseph Andre Azcona, and together with my group mates Ingrid Esquilla, Hershey Grace Manreal, and Beatrice Jubilee Orbiso, we will be reporting to you the life and works of Rizal, profiling a hero. Let us start off with who is Dr. Jose Rizal. His full name is Jose Rizal's full name is Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado Alonso y Realonda. He was born on June 19, 1861 at Calamba, Laguna. His mother's name is Doña Chudora Alonso Rialonda y Quintos, also known as Doña Lolay, and his father's name is Don Francisco Engracio Rizal Mercado y Alejandro, or Don Kikoy. Next, when Rizal was born in 1861, and it was in 1861, the year when the British technologist and trader Nicholas Looney arrived in the Philippine Islands and introduced the sugar central in the present-day Western Visayas region. During the birth of Rizal, the Philippine economy was, as well as the social-political landscape, was affected by the peak of imperialist interventions in the world. The country was then under by Spanish rule and had compelling trade relations with foreign countries such as the British in the ports of Manila. This was the time where the birth of social and middle classes. Moving on to the occupation of parents and social class of Jose Rizal. Ingrid?
Hello. What is the occupation of his mother? Teodora Morales Alonso Realonda y Quintos is a mathematician who graduated from College of Santa Rosa, according to Craig in 2005. So, what is the occupation of his father? Francisco Mercado's occupation was a tenant of the estate. So, what is their socio-economic class? According to Guerrero in 1969, the Rizals belonged to the Principales. Growing up, his family would be considered privileged and well above average of their time. Both of Jose Rizal's parents had been people of substance and influence. Rizal's father came from an affluent family who chose to move to Calamba to cultivate lands leased from the Dominicans and became the wealthiest men in town. Francisco Mercado was the first to build a stone house, own a carriage, keep a library, and keep his children educated in Manila. Jose Rizal himself had an aya, or a personal nanny, even though he had elder sisters growing up who, in less fortunate households, were expected to look after younger siblings. The Rizals were also sociable member of the society, according to Craig in 2005, described in his book Lineage, Life, and Labors of Jose Rizal, to be welcoming to visitors who frequent their homes such as church, civil and military authorities, where they consider the Rizal mansion to be situated conveniently as a resting place. The Rizals also participated prominently in all social and religious affairs in the community.
Moving on, we have here Jose Rizal's siblings. So how many were they in the family? Well, Chodora and Francisco had 11 children. Dr. Jose Rizal had 10 siblings. They were Saturnina, born in 1850 and died on 1913, Pasiano, 1851 to 1930, Narcisa in 1952 to 1939, Olympia in 1855 to 1887, Lucia 1857 to 1919, Maria 1859 to 1945, Concepcion 1862 to 1865, Josefa 1865 to 1945, Trinidad 1868 to 1951, and Soledad 1870 to 1929, according to Black Widow 2019. The eldest among the siblings is Saturnina. She was born on June 4, 1850. And the youngest was Soledad, among the 11 children of Don Kikoy and Doña Lola. She was born in 1870. Rizal had 9 sisters. They were Saturnina, Narcisa, Olympia, Lucia, Maria, Concepcion, Josefa, Trinidad, and Soledad. Jose Rizal only had one brother. His brother is Pasiano. And he was older by Rizal for about 10 years. He was the second child of Don Kikoy and Doña Lolay. The closest sister to Jose Rizal was Narcisa. She memorized all of Rizal's poems and could recite them all. His basic education. Jose Rizal's first teacher before he was put to formal school in Binyan, he was taught to read and write and also pray as well as household chores, and was encouraged to write poetry by his mother, Doña Chidora Alonso or Doña Lolay. She served as Dr. Jose Rizal's first teacher. He entered his first learning. Initially, he was taught by his mother to read and write and was later sent to a private school in Binyan, Laguna for his first formal education. What type of formal education was that? Dr. Sarsal was brought to a private Latin school located in Binyan, headed by Justiniano Aquino Cruz, but he fell short of the curriculum because Jose Rizal was too advanced for it. There he learned arithmetic, reading and writing Tagalog, Spanish, and Latin, but before that, these topics were tutored by Leon Monroy, a family friend of his father. Where did he have his formal basic education? After Dr. Rosa Rizal studied in Binyan with Maestro Justiniano Aquino Cruz, his parents sent him to Ateneo Escuelas de Municipal in Manila, which was formerly located in Intramuros, to have his first formal basic education. Who was his first teacher in his first formal Spanish course? Dr. Rosa Rizal's parents hired a tutor for him to be taught Spanish and Latin by his father's former classmate Leon Monroy, but the old tutor only lasted for about 5 months before he died. How old was he when he entered his first formal education? When Dr. Cerizal was about 11 years old, he enrolled in Ateneo Municipal de Manila, where he scored outstanding grades in subjects like chemistry, natural history, physics, and philosophy. This was according to Filipinas Heritage Library. What was the title of the prose that he wrote that won competition in Ateneo Escuelas de Municipal? So when Jose Rizal was 19 years old, he wrote El Consejo de los Dioses, or the Council of Gods. This piece revolved around the three literary figures, Homer, Virgil, and Cervantes, whose reputations are being examined by the Greek gods in Mount Olympus. They were arguing who among them is the best when we talk about art and virtue. It was Cervantes whose piece revolved around social reforms and rule of reason, which won. This piece talked about how the writings of one can influence the course of life and direction of the society that he lived through his literary works. This was a preview on the bloodless revolution that Rizal aimed to achieve using his writings. It was him who wanted social reform for the country through his pieces and influenced people through his writings. This piece created by Rizal in 1880 during the early days of the propaganda movement. The movement was a response to the brutal doings of the Spaniards, specifically to what happened in Cavite or the Cavite Mutiny and to the Gomburza in 1872, according to Mojares. Next, let's talk about his higher education with Hershey.
So, what was the bachelor's degree that Rizal took in the Philippines? Rizal graduated with a land surveyor's and assessor's degree at the Ateneo Municipal in 1877 at the age of 16 with the highest honors. At the same time, he was taking up philosophy and letters from 1877 to 1878 in his first term at the University of Santo Tomas. However, when his mother was about to go blind, he decided to study ophthalmology in the school term 1878 to 1879 at the UST Faculty of Medicine and Surgery. However, didn't finish ophthalmology due to the fact that he became detached in a political manner by enemies among the faculty and priests who requested that he incorporate it into their system. So this is according to the Jose Rizal and Filipinas Heritage Library. So, in what college or university did he attend for a baccalaureate degree? He attended Ateneo Municipal for his land surveyors and assessor's degree, and the University of Santo Tomas for philosophy and letters and ophthalmology, according to Filipinas Heritage Library. So, describe the social political situation in the Philippines during his years in college. Rizal entered Ateneo in 1872 and graduated in 1877, according to the Jose Rizal. In 1872, Rizal's first year in Ateneo, the Cavite Mutiny happened on January 20. It was the Indios attempting to oust the Spanish government in the country. Based on the accounts of Jose Montero y Vidal, who is a Spanish historian, and Governor General Rafael Izquierdo, on that day, the celebration of the Virgin of Loreto was held in Sampaloc, Manila, and were fireworks displays were used to celebrate. It was reported that those who were in Cavite thought that the fireworks were a sign of attack, which led to a bunch of 200 men in which the head was Sergeant Lamadrid, start an attack aiming at Spanish officers and take the arsenal. When Governor Izquierdo heard of the news, he commanded the Spanish army in Cavite to reinforce to end their uprising. As a result, the rebellion was easily put to an end because the reinforcements coming from Manila, which were anticipated, did not arrive. This is according to Piedad Pugay 2012. Also in 1872, the Gomborza, which was composed of Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, who were Filipino priests, faced, faced execution through garrote due to being falsely accused of treason and sedition. The Gomborza belonged to the developing movement of secularization, which aimed to ask for changes wherein native Filipinos are allowed to be parish priests and to get hold of the authorized posts or text in the Catholic Church in which the Spanish priests have the advantage of, according to Manalo. Next slide, please. So, Dr. Jose Rizal in Europe.
Dr. Rizal in Europe will be discussed by Beatrice Jubilee Tan.
All right, so Dr. Jose Rizal in Europe. What what year did Rizal travel to Madrid, Spain? So Jose Rizal went to Madrid in May of 1882. He was 20 years old and he left to pursue his studies in medicine at the Universidad Central de Madrid in Spain. So he was in Europe for probably about an estimate of 10 years, but he wasn't there for the entirety of those 10 years. So in August 1887, Rizal actually went home to Manila after 5 years of circling around Europe. However, Rizal was pressured to leave the country once again due to the Spanish friar's condemnation of Noli Me Tangere, which he published in that same year. So next is he traveled. So after all the heat happening in the Philippines from their condemnation of his writings, he then traveled to Hong Kong and the United States until his return to Europe in 1888. So in 1892, he left Europe for good to avoid the rivalry between him and the Del Pilars and moved to Hong Kong. So in June, he finally returned to the Philippines for good. So technically, he circumnavigated Europe for about 10 years. So Rizal decided to study in Madrid because there's actually layers to this. Because aside, Rizal first started his career on the fact that he wanted to become an eye doctor to cure his mother. But then he saw that this isn't going to be well, his education was not going to be well cultivated in the current political environment in the Philippines. Rizal possessed a great source of wonder, and this is where the idea of Spain comes in. Rizal possessed a great source of wonder about European society and all that it has to offer, as we were colonized, and so of course we would in turn be curious about this country that is taking over our country, and this keen study, nay, secret mission of infiltrating. So basically, he was sent there to aside from the fact that he really wanted to learn, there was also a hidden agenda, which was to infiltrate and learn about the European culture, to gear him with the knowledge on how to go about with the revolution. Adding to this, going back to the current state of the education in the Philippines, Rizal grew tired of the constant discrimination and disappointments that he had to face while he was studying in Manila, and how Filipinos were viewed as second-class citizens in the academe and in society. So who helped him prepare his documents to travel? It was actually Rizal's brother, Pasiano Mercado. Oh, so the question is, why? So the thing is, you have to learn that the Rizal brothers or the Mercado brothers were actually both really smart. They're both academics. So Guerrero wrote that Pasiano believed Rizal was the better choice because he was still young, he was less controversial, there was less heat on him. Because during this time, when Pasiano was still in college, he was friends with uh when Pasiano studied Latin under Maestro Justiniano Cruz before he attended the Colegio de San Jose in Manila. In the city, he lived and worked with Father Jose Burgos, which, and in turn, he also helped Father Burgos in the campaign for the secularization of the movement. And that's why, let's just say there was a lot of surveillance and there were a lot of eyes on Pasiano, and he felt like it was like Rizal would be a better choice. He would be the perfect spy per se to send to Spain. Because he was already very basically he was very outspoken. There were eyes already on him, and he thought no one would suspect his younger brother. So Rizal's talents were not the only things that qualified him, according to Pasiano in a letter to Jose. So according to a letter, the main purpose of your going is not to improve yourself in that profession, but in other more useful things, that to which you have the greater inclination. So this is actually safely worded in case someone else reads it, but it's actually, you know, you it's actually Pasiano saying, you need, you're great, you're talented, but you have a greater purpose to serve in which you are being chosen to go there. So the social political situation at the time was, um Filipinos were viewed as lesser class, inferior to the colonial rulers and settlers, and natives who were more talented and excelled in the academy were disliked and viewed as threats. So the Spanish authorities hated it when Filipinos knew better, when Filipino because and basically in that situation the Filipinos were in poor and enslaved in their own lands, and that's why we had to like sneak in. That's why they had to sneak in Rizal, because they feel threatened when the Filipinos knew better.
Next, moving on to the three priests. The question is, how old was Rizal when he went to Spain? So Rizal joined a literary competition in which he won, but the people were disappointed when they learned that the winner was a fellow Filipino or an Indio. This unfortunate event, as well as his realization of the current learnings in the country are not enough for him to practice medicine, and which lead to Rizal's choice to further study in Europe, specifically in Spain at the age of 20. He he went to Spain at the age he went to Spain on May, so he was about 20 years old when he went there, and also partly because of the medical condition of his mother. So who were the three priests who were martyred at that time? So the three priests who were martyred that time were the Filipino secular priests Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, also known as the Gumbursa. They were martyred in Cavite, according to Piedad Pugay 2012. Why were they martyred? So the three Filipino priests were falsely accused of treason and sedition by the Spanish authorities because of how they were linked to the orchestration of the Cavite Mutiny. So the basis of the accusation of the priests were, they were active in the secularization movement, and they were behind the documentos para cuestión para y Filipinas. They were also behind the publication La Verdad, where they questioned the Spanish authorities and demanded reforms because of the abuses that were present in the society at that time. So for example, in the case of Father Jacinto Zamora, they have not found a shred of evidence except for a piece of paper which contains a note that says, "Big reunion, come without fail. Friends will come well supplied with powder and bullets," according to Quirino 1973. So these three priests were killed because the Spanish government wanted to, parang gusto nilang, let us say, mag-impose ng threats sa mga people who wanted to challenge the government or wanted to defy the authorities. So they wanted the three priests na parang as an example na if ito yung gagawin ninyo, there's a possibility na papatayin kayo, parang ganun. What was their involvement in the Cavite Mutiny? So according to, next slide, according to the documentation of the Spanish historian Jose Montero y Vidal, the three priests known as the Gombursa were active supporters of the secularization movement, and this is part of the attempt of the Indies to oust the Spanish government in the Philippines. So they've had enough. The people had enough. So they wanted to for reform, and priests, of course, the religion, the church is very powerful at that time, and of course they hold so much power and relevance in the society. So if people were to follow the orders of these three priests, the Spanish government really thinks that they are influential enough to spark that quote unquote parang change and revolution towards the people. So who was responsible for their martyrdom? So it was Governor General Rafael Izquierdo who magnified and highlighted the doings of the three priests in the event of the Cavite Mutiny. He reported to the King of Spain about how the Gumburza corroborated with the rebels, and thus they conspired, quote unquote, conspired and supported the enemies of Spain, and how they desired to oust Spanish government and put a new hari in the person of Father Burgos and Zamora. So Governor General Rafael Esquerdo falsely accused these priests. Parang he wanted to, parang he framed them to for that doings ba, para na sila yung mapag-initan ng 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 Hari of Spain, and that they will be um parang maparusahan sila sa mga salang ginawa daw nila, according to Governor General Izquierdo. So what colonial policy change took place after Cavite Mutiny? So the death of the friars changed the trajectory of how society was doing at that time, because of how the government solely used Governor Izquierdo's report and the public opinion and failed to conduct an investigation. They just believe kung ano yung sinulat ni Governor General Esquerdo in his letter, in his report, and they do parang follow-up investigation during that time, which this was their sole basis of the parang conviction of these three priests. So, and which led to, of course, their death in 1872 rather. In 1872, the central government of Spain decided that the friars will be deprived of power to intervene in the affairs of the government and also with the direction and management of schools because of how they tend to use their power and make self-serving decisions to stay in power. Again, that was in 1872. Now let's move on to Rizal and the Filipino social movement to be discussed by Ingrid.
So, who were the other Filipino students associated with Rizal in Madrid? The other Filipino students were Graciano Lopez Haina, who founded the La Solidaridad, Gregorio Sangsiangco, who is now known for his authorship of El Progreso de Filipinas in 1881, which defended the natives against the charges of indolence, and other members of the Círculo Hispano-Filipino, which were dominated by Creoles and Peninsulares. There were also artists such as painter Juan Duna, Felix Resurrección Hidalgo, Miguel Zaragoza, and Esteban Villanueva, and engraver Melesio Figueroa. What organization did they establish in Madrid? They established the Círculo Hispano-Filipino in July 1880, according to Cano in 2011. And according to Constantino in 1972, it was a Filipino community in Spain with members from Creoles, urbanized Indios, and Chinese mestizos. So what were its objectives? According to Cano in 2011, the objectives of the association were to improve the moral and physical condition of the archipelago, influence public opinion in the hope to achieve political and administrative reform of the Cortes and the government. There were an initial of 16 reforms of the Asociación. It is the compulsory teaching of Spanish in the archipelago, of the use of stocks, and the pillory and lash in jails of courts of justice, the importance of judges' capacity to speak the local dialects so as to avoid the need for court interpreters, the establishment of a property registry and a civil registry, the elimination of church thieves and and compulsory alms contribution, the establishment of secondary schools in 2 or 3 of the provinces of the archipelago, a radical reform of the Universidad de Filipinas to achieve parity with mainland Spanish universities, the promotion of planting cotton shrubs, cocoa trees, and indigo producing plants, the review or signature of commercial exchange treaties with China and Japan, the establishment of agricultural banks, a new territorial framework for the Philippine provinces, the construction of extensive network of roads and country roads, as well as affordable railroad system, the analysis and reasons of causes of the financial crisis in the Philippines and measures to remedy its cause, the legislation to resolve the agricultural and market crisis in the Philippines, the modification of custom tariff duty schedule, and lastly, the reforms in public administration. So who were the prominent Filipinos associated with Rizal in Madrid? Two prominent figures were the Filipino expatriate journalist Graciano Lopez Haina and the journalist Marcelo H. Del Pilar, according to Coroza in 2015. So why were they called the triumvirate? Because they pioneered Filipino liberal democracy, which is synthesis of a concept liberty and sovereignty of the people with exogenous origin with an indigenous and vigorous value. Graciano Lopez Haina, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Jose Rizal were identified by historians as the triumvirate because they were well known for their contributions that pioneered the propaganda movement by raising Philippine consciousness towards nationalism. Marcelo H. Del Pilar gave an analysis of liberal democracy in his essay, while Rizal celebrated the idea in his novels and essays. The idea of liberal democracy was conceived and advocated vigorously and eloquently by these three, which was passed on by the Philippine Revolution during the first and second phase. The revolutionaries accepted with alacrity the legacy of the reform movement, which is according to Agpalo in 1976. What was the name of the fortnightly paper that they published in Spain? They published an editorial. Wait, I'm sorry, we forgot to edit this slide. So An editorial in the first issue, which was cited in Hornedo in 1991, published in La Solidaridad titled Nuestros Propósitos, which translates to Our Aims, narrates the aims of the publication as to combat all reaction, to impede every retrogression, to applaud, to accept every liberal idea, to defend all progress, in brief, to be a propagandist above all of the ideals of democracy, so that these may reign in all nations here and overseas. The aims, therefore, of La Solidaridad are to gather, to collect liberative ideas which are scattered every day in the fields of politics, sciences, arts, letters, commerce, agriculture, and industry, which is from Hornedo in 1991 in page 208. By this, we can affirm that the aims of the publication was to aid the propaganda movement which sought reform and inspire national consciousness towards the government and religion in the Philippines. It also aimed to enlighten Spaniards who about their distant colony to have access to equal privileges for the colony. So, what was the social movement that Triumvirate led and why? It is the propaganda movement in 1872 to 1892 was concluded to be the first nationalist movement led by Filipino elites who took inspiration from pro-nationalist activism of the Gomburza, which is according to Schumacher in 1997. They led social movement because they sought assimilation and reform. The propaganda movement planted the seed of political consciousness that blossomed into the nationalist revolution in 1896 and later on to the struggle of independence that ensued. So, challenges in the family.
So, challenges in the family. What field of study did Jose Rizal undertake in Madrid? Rizal went to Madrid in the autumn of 1882. He took a course in medicine in which he obtained the degree licentiate in medicine in 1884, and alongside a diploma in philosophy and letters the following year at the Universidad Central de Madrid in Spain, according to Wenceslao. What were the challenges that Rizal encountered while studying abroad? While studying in Europe, the challenges that Rizal faced were the high cost of living, and his family struggled to send him money. During that time, his family was in trouble due to arguments over land, according to De Jesus. After living in 2 years in Madrid, he encountered the financial problems because the farms back in the Philippines were occupied by locusts and ruined by droughts. His monthly allowances wouldn't arrive on time, and sometimes he, they would not even arrive, according to our hero Jose Rizal, 2014. Next slide, please. So, what was the situation of his family while he was in Spain? His family suffered from financial instability while he was in Spain. This was because their family agricultural business was tied to the circumstances of the industry of sugar export, and the cost of sugar had dropped in the global market. This led to their difficulty supporting Rizal's studies. In 1884, the terrible price of sugar left the family broke, according to SICAT 2020. So how did his family handle the situation? Because Rizal's monthly allowances would arrive late and sometimes never, Pasano, his brother, was pressured one time to put up for sale the pony of his younger brother just to send him his allowance to Madrid, according to Kadyogan 2020. So going back, why was his mother imprisoned when he was a small boy? When Rizal was 11 years old, his solo Spaniards arrested his mother, Doña Chodora. They made her walk for 50 kilometers throughout Laguna. When she arrived at Santa Cruz after tiring days of walking under the heat of the sun, she was charged and sent to jail for 2 years with no trial for a made-up story against her, specifically an allegation that she tried to get her sister-in-law, Chodora Alberto, poisoned. It was reported by Chodora, by, sorry, it was reported by Barbara Cruz Gonzalez, Chodora's granddaughter, that the accusation started with Doña Chodora trying to step in a problem between Chodora Alberta and his husband, Doña Chodora's brother, Jose Alberto. Jose wanted to divorce her, but Doña Chodora discouraged him from doing so because it could affect the reputation of their family. Chidora was furious over it. It was alleged that she was having an affair with the head of the Guardia Civil. When Doña Teodora gave Teodora Alberto food, Teodora declined to eat and had her dog eat it instead. The dog reportedly died after eating it. Doña Teodora was arrested through the help of Teodora's lover from the Guardia Civil. This is according to Limos, 2019. Next slide, please. So who was Rizal's closest friend that he met abroad? His closest friend was Ferdinand Blumentritt. Rizal heard of the Austrian scholar when he was in Germany doing his medical studies. Blumentritt had historical and ethnographic articles and books on the Philippines which he had never visited. When Rizal learned that Blumentritt was learning the Tagalog language, he wrote him a letter which led to their friendship. Rizal wrote in his letter that he will send him a book written in Tagalog by a Filipino. Throughout their friendship, Rizal and Blumentritt exchanged letters that were about their ventures of being scholars. They also gave each other books, manuscripts, and maps, according to Hofilenia 2014. So next is Rizal's love and relationship with women.
Rizal's love and relationship with women will be discussed by Jubilee Orbiso.
Right. So for Rizal's love and relationship with women. So did Rizal have a love interest with women? Well, Jose Rizal was very notorious for being a womanizer and has had um to date and according to document has known 9 known love affairs. So who was Rizal's first love? His first love was when he was 16, when he was infatuated by this girl from Lipa, Batangas. So when Rizal was 16, he visited his grandmother with his friend Mariano Katigbak. And the Katigbaks were close to Rizal's grandmother. And coincidentally, Segunda was at the grandma's house when Rizal and Mariano visited. Uh, so um, and also Segunda was a really close friend of Rizal's sister Olympia, whom he visited every week at La Concordia College. And every time he would visit his sister, he would talk to Segunda, and the two became very close. However, Segunda was already engaged to someone from her hometown. And in his journal, he declared that ended my confident young love, ended at an early hour my first love. So, who were the other women associated with Rizal? So, there were other women who were associated with Rizal. So, other than Segunda, Katigbak, there was also Leonor Valenzuela or si Orang. Um, Si Orang was the girl next door. They met when he was a sophomore at the University of Santo Tomas, where he lived at Doña Concha Leiva's boarding house in Intramuros. And Orang was then 14 years old and was his neighbor back then. Then there was also Leonor Rivera, another Leonor. This Leonor was his reference. I think this Leonor Rivera was his reference to his image of Maria Clara. Um, basically, yeah. The next is Consuelo Ortiga y Perez, and then Seiko Usui, Gertrude Beckett, Susan Jacoby, Nellie Bousted, and Josephine Bracken. Next slide, please. And in what circumstances did they meet? So Sir Rizal was again in UST and boarding in the house of Doña Concha Leyva, where he met Leonor. Rizal was then um, next. Rizal was then. I'm sorry. Rizal was then engaged, and his third lover. He was engaged to his cousin, Leonor Rivera, during his third year in the university. When he was studying in the Universidad Central de Madrid, he often visited the home of former Manila Mayor Don Pablo Ortiga y Rey, where he met Don Pablo's daughter, Consuelo Ortiga y Perez. And when Rizal moved to Tokyo, he spotted a Japanese girl walking, and then he asked uh, a man nearby who that woman was, or maybe the gardener. He asked who that woman was, and that woman was Seiko Uzui. Uh, according to this, according to Rizal's journals, he was willing to settle down in Japan for her. However, the the movement called, and Rizal had to leave Japan. In May 1888, Rizal stayed at the house of the Beckett family, where he met Gertrude Beckett. And while he was in Belgium, away from his his then fiancee Leonor Rivera, Rizal was found in the comfort of the niece of his landlady, Susan Jacoby. And while he was in Biarritz, Rizal stayed in the Bousted family winter residence, where he met their daughter, Nellie Bousted. And lastly, when Rizal was exiled in Dapitan, a woman and her blind father sought help from an ophthalmologist, which was Rizal's specialty. And basically, they fell in love. He fell in love at first sight with Josephine Bracken.
Moving on with Rizal and his martyrdom. So what year did Dr. Jose Rizal return to the Philippines? It was in 1887 when he first returned to the Philippines when from Spain wherein he studied medicine at the University of Heidelberg, where he wrote Noli Me Tangere, and also he went back in 1892 according to the Library of Congress. So why did Jose Rizal return to the Philippines? So Dr. Jose Rizal could not explain to the members of the Ilustrado movement that he studied medicine specifically in the field of ophthalmology in 1887 because it was the time when his works were under the Spanish radar from being subversive, and with that he cannot do anything about it. But he needed to go back, wherein he could not tell his fellow Ilustrados the real reason. In 1887, that was when his mother was threatened to be blind because of a cataract, and with that, he felt the need to go home to cure his mother's disease, according to Padilla 2019. So what happened to his mother? After Dr. Rosa Rizal successfully executed the operation in his mother, which saved her from being blind, Doña Lola was treated as her with her cataract has been removed. So where did he operate on his mother? So when Dr. Rizal came back to the Philippines, he put up a clinic that caters to people with eye problems and was able to establish this practice in 1887. The operation was performed in Hong Kong because the family went there not in order not to be visible to the Spanish authorities who would persecute him if he was seen in the country. Why was Dr. Jose Rizal taken to the Pitan? In 1892, Dr. Jose Rizal was exiled because there was social unrests among the people of the country. The Filipino citizens were slowly realizing the abuse of that the Spanish did to the country. He was sent there through careful watch of the Jesuits and the Spanish governor so that he would not perform his quote unquote wrong beliefs to the people. So to describe the social political situation at that time. So An organization called the Katipunan was founded by the Filipinos in 1892 who have an interest in bringing down the Spanish government after the Masonic practices and beliefs promote fight using weapons and terrorist assassinations in the circumstance of complete confidentiality. The Katipunan served as a substitute Filipino government that is not that's not complete without the president and cabinet. The organization became more progressive when Andres Bonifacio ran over it. The Philippine Revolution started when the Grito de Balintawak, also known as the Cry of Balintawak, according to Guerrero et al. 2003, happened to make when the cry of Balintawak happened to make the Filipinos, rebel against the Spanish colonial power on the 26th of June 1896. The Filipinos stored their tax and citizenship documents and began to fight across Luzon. The Spanish and the people who supported them in the Philippines were terrified of the Katipunan movement. As a result, some 4,000 rebels were arrested or exiled as well as being executed. In this part of the movement, unity certainly did not exist among Filipinos. The president of the revolutionary government was Emilio Aguinaldo, and La Liga Filipino was led by Rizal. Under the rule of General Camilo de Polavieja, he ordered Rizal and 24 other people to be executed, according to the Library of Congress. Additionally, there was the propaganda movement, which was the earliest Filipino nationalist movement and run from 1872 to 1892. A Filipino elite was the head. The proto-nationalist activism of personality like Jose Burgos and his execution under the Spanish authorities was the inspiration of this movement. The propagandists in which majority were half Spanish heritage and viewed themselves as recipient of the Spanish civilization, had beliefs that the Philippines should be considered a Spanish province and be fully included in Spain and not only being its colony. In addition, Filipinos should be given similar citizenship rights given to citizens of Spain. Second, they attempt to have the Spanish fries evicted from the country and to empower native Filipino religious leaders. Lastly, being a cultural movement, the propaganda exhibited the young Filipino elites' writing and artistic outputs as a way that they have the intellect and experience that is the same level with their Spanish counterparts. The Spanish government and public were its targets. However, being an elite movement, they weren't successful in becoming involved with the broader population of Filipinos. The movement got little support and created progress in Spain, and Spanish government had less interests in the massive political format in the Spanish political nature in the Philippines. The propagandists were deemed as rebels in the Philippines, and many of them were exiled. Despite that it was, generally unsuccessful, it brought about a political awareness that contributed to the nationalist revolution of 1896 and fight for independence that came after, according to Religion and Public Life at Harvard Divinity School. Now let us talk about the continued social movements, which will be reported by Beatrice Jubilita.
So, continuing the social movements, what is La Liga Filipina? La Liga Filipina was a group founded by Jose Rizal on July 3, 1892. It aimed to break off the Philippines from the Spanish rule. So, this reformist group was ought to be the last hurrah of the propaganda movement before the proper establishment of the Philippine Revolution. So when was La Liga Filipina established? It was established on July 3, 1892 at a house in Tondo, Manila. Next slide. So what were the objectives of La Liga Filipina? There were actually five. So in La Liga Filipina, in its constitution, Rizal wrote, first is to unite the whole archipelago. Second, the mutual protection in case of trouble and need. Third, defense against every violence and injustice. Fourth is the development of education, agriculture, and commerce. E, study and implementation the implementation of reforms. Who were the first set of officers of La Liga Filipina? Uh, the president for La Liga Filipina was Ambrosio Salvador. Fiscal was Agustin de la Rosa. The treasurer was Bonifacio Arevalo. And the secretary was Diodato Arellano. Next slide.
So Rizal and the Pitan. What year was Rizal taken to the Pitan? It was the year 1892. He arrived there on July 17, according to Lapot 2018. Rizal was arrested under the command of the Governor General of the Philippines. He was deported to the Pitan after it was supposed that seditious leaflets were found in his suitcase, according to Sutherland. When he was arrested, he was in the Mediterranean and was sent back to Manila to face trial. It was found that he was guilty of each of the three charges. So why was he taken to the Pitan? Rizal was taken to the Pitan as a prisoner. He was, please go back to the previous slide. Okay, so he was arrested by Spanish officials for several reasons. These are establishing an organization, publication of books and newspapers that support rebelling and subversive ideas to the people, owning bunch of handbills that are against the rules of the Spanish officials, disapproving of the religion of the disapproving of the religion the Spaniards spread to the country, disseminating filibusterism in the country, according to reference 2020, and the dedication of his novel El Filibusterismo to the Gumburza and the emphasis on its title page, which states that the separation of the Philippines from Spain would be its only redemption, which is according to our hero Jose Rizal. So according to your dictionary, filibusterism is the conducting of war that is unapproved. Next slide, please. So what did Rizal do while he was in the Pitan? While Rizal was in the Pitan, he spent most of his time in making his artistic and literary skills better, working on agricultural and local projects, participating in business tasks, and communicating with his friends in Europe, specifically Ferdinand Blumentritt and Reinhold Ross, through writing letters to them. So actually, Rizal was very productive during his time in the Pitan. So he used his different professions in contributing to the community of the Pitan. So being a physician, he gave free medicine to his patients as many of them were impoverished. He even performed an ophthalmic surgery on his mother. Being an engineer, he used his knowledge in the waterworks system he built in the Pitan. To see his role as an educator, he founded a school in the Pitan in which 16 young boys who belonged to notable families enrolled. His students were made to do community projects like preserving his garden instilled by him. They were also taught by Rizal to read, write in English and Spanish, history, industrial work, and more. Being an agriculturist, he also planted significant crops and trees that produce fruits like cacao, coffee, sugarcane, coconuts, etc. in the 16-hectare land that he owned. He even taught the native farmers the modern procedures in agriculture. He also acted out as an artist for the Sisters of Charity who were getting ready for the image of the Holy Virgin to arrive. Moreover, he sketched anything that caught his attention, such as the three fauna species that were unusual which he discovered. So these species were a dragon or a lizard, frog, and beetle. Rizal developed an interest in the languages spoken in the Pitan. So he studied and compared the Visayan and Malayan languages which were used in the region. Being a scientist, he discovered three species which were Draco rizali, which the English name is flying dragon, Apogonia rizali, in which the English name is small beetle, and Dracophorus rizali. The English name for this is rare frog. He did research and studied different fields like ethnography and archaeology, according to our hero's Rizal. So who visited Rizal in Dapitan and why? So a man who claimed to be Pablo Mercado visited Rizal in Dapitan in March 1895. He claimed to be Rizal's relative and volunteered to deliver satires to the people in Manila. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, wait. Let me go back to the previous slide. Okay, okay. So he claimed to be Rizal's relative and volunteered to deliver his letters to the people in Manila. As Rizal became suspicious of him, he asked Mercado questions and it was revealed that Florencio Nanaman was his real name. Nanaman is from Cagayan de Misamis and was paid by the friars of the Recollects to be a secret agent. However, Rizal did not kick him out but rather invite him to his place as it was raining on that night, according to Maniabog, 2020. So it wasn't only him who visited Rizal in the pit then. The following year in July, Andres Bonifacio sent Dr. Pio Valenzuela to the Pitan to visit Rizal. Valenzuela pretended to be accommodating the a blind patient who was going to Rizal for treatment, and he was successful in carefully sending the message of the Katipunan for Rizal. However, that peaceful ways were much better than violence in order to gain freedom, which is according to Maniabog. And also, it was his family who visited him. So Doña Teodora and her daughter Trinidad went to the Pitan in August 1893 to live with him. At that time, Doña Teodora had cataract in which the operation by Rizal was successful. At different times, his sisters Maria and Narcisa visited him. His mother and sisters visiting was a way of comfort to him when he found out that his lover, Leonor Rivera, passed away. Also, three of his nephews, Mauricio, which his nickname is Maurice, son of Maria, Teodosio, and Estanislao, in which Teodosio's nickname is Osio, and Estanislao's nickname is Stan, who are sons of Lucia, went to the Pitan to get their early education under Rizal. The daughter of Narcisa, Angelica, also went to the Pitan to live with Rizal for a period of time, according to Maniabong 2020. Next slide, please. So, who is Josephine Bracken? Josephine Bracken is known to be Rizal's common law wife, according to Doyle 2021. She was an Irish girl who was 18 years old when she met Rizal. Wences Lauretana described her as slim, had chestnut blonde hair, blue-eyed, had elegant and simple fashion, and cheerful. Bracken came to the Pitan from Hong Kong in February 1895, along with her father, George Topher, who was blind, and Manuela Orlac, a Filipina. So Bracken was born in Victoria, Hong Kong on August 9, 1876, to James Bracken and Elizabeth Jane McBride, who were both Irish. After Elizabeth's death after giving birth, James Bracken gave his daughter up for adoption. Her godfather, George Topher, who was a blind American engineer and Portuguese wife, adopted her. Topher's wife died and he remarried another Portuguese named Francesca Spencer. After Spencer's death in 1891, Topher remarried another woman in which Bracken found difficult to deal with. She spent her early years of education at the convent of the Canossian Sisters. So how did Rizal and Josephine please let me go back to the previous slide. So how did Rizal and Josephine meet? At Topher's old age, he became sick due to a double cataract. Unfortunately, it was difficult to find an ophthalmologist in Hong Kong that could treat him. Rizal was a famous ophthalmologist and doctor who did his profession even when he was in the Pitan. His fame reached Hong Kong, which led to Topher discover him. He traveled to the Pitan along with his adopted daughter Josephine. Despite Rizal's efforts to treat him, it was found that Topher's sickness can't be cured, according to Passion 2016. So Rizal and Bracken fell in love with each other right away, and in only 1 month, they decided to marry, in which Topher was horrified, according to our hero as a result. Let me proceed to the next slide, please. So what was the relationship. Topher was strongly against the relationship between Bracken and Rizal that Bracken joined him when he left the Pitan for Manila on March 14, 1895, along with Narcisa, Rizal's sister. Bracken brought with her Rizal's letter to his mother. She was then left with Narcisa by her father, who was going to Hong Kong. However, the remaining family of Rizal were wary of Josephine, as she was deemed as threatening, according to myinfobasket.com. So, according to some references, Rizal proposed to Bracken and filed an application for their marriage before Topher and Bracken's departure from Manila. However, due to his works and political beliefs, Father Obak, the local priest, will only choose to do the ceremony once the Bishop of Cebu grants Rizal the permission. It was either the bishop that didn't respond to him or Rizal failed to send a letter due to Taufer's sudden leave from the Pitan, according to Dory. So, despite the fact that there was no priest, Rizal and Bracken married when she returned to the Pitan. They married themselves. So, according to Alboro, there were there were two witnesses when they got married. The couple lived together in Rizal's octagonal bamboo house located in the Pitan. They had a child whose birth was untimely, but later died a few hours after being born, according to myinfobasket.com. So did it sustain? Why or why not? Rizal wrote in a letter for Trinidad dated January 15, 1896, that he and Bracken never had an argument and they were always joyfully laughing. However, their love affair didn't sustain for a long time. Later on, arguments happened in which one of these was violent that caused Bracken's miscarriage, according to a Philippines Free Press article. This article also indicated that Rizal lost his comfort with Bracken and his petition to be a medical volunteer assigned in Cuba also resulted in him being unhappy with her. When he was on the way to Cuba, authorities arrested Rizal and then he was given a punishment of death after a mock trial. Bracken went to see him in his cell on December 29, 1896. He then asked for forgiveness for all the sadness she felt from him. He married her as authorized by the Spanish authorities minutes before his execution. At the age of 20, Bracken became a widow, according to Passion 2016. Next slide, please.
Next, let us talk about the circumstances of Rizal's martyrdom. So for the first question, why did Rizal offer his services to the Spanish army in the Cuban War in 1895? During his exile in Dapitan, he was still in contact with his foreign friend Ferdinand Blumentritt, where the latter suggested to him that he should offer his medical knowledge to the Spanish army to serve as a doctor in Cuba. In that way, the Spanish government will have a lesser eye on him and he could perform things such as creating more novels and social movements that he wished to pursue, according to Cabrera 2018. So why did the Spanish turn down Rizal's offer? Spain turned down Rizal's offer to volunteer as a doctor in Cuba because his rebellion and, and formation of illegal associations. He left the Pitan, and when he was already traveling far from where he departed, he was asked to return to the Philippines to face the court. So Rizal did not really arrive in Cuba when he went to when he stopped in Spain. He was parang pinabalik siya sa Pilipinas and that was the start of his parang trial before he was sentenced to. Yeah, that was the start para pinabalik siya and binabalik siya ng Spanish authorities, which eventually led to his death. Next is Rizal at Fort Santiago. Ingrid?
So, when was Rizal taken to Fort Santiago? According to Craig in 2005, Rizal was taken to Fort Santiago on November 3, 1896. So, why was he taken to Fort Santiago? Rizal was accused of inciting the uprisings of the Katipunan. Rizal was accused of having started an illegal society, claiming that the Liga Filipina had for its single purpose to commit the criminal act of rebellion. It is important to note that an alleged uprising of the Katipunan was also happening during that time. A curate from Tondo professed to have allegedly discovered a massive conspiracy to Governor General Blanco, which they pressured Blanco to take extreme measures to terrorize Filipinos in the hopes to quell the uprising. Blanco was not oblivious to the Katipunan, but later on realized its activities were no longer limited to speech making to gain revenue. High officials warned the country was infected with, quote, a fever and only bloodletting can cure it. An effort was made earlier to procure evidence against Rizal by means of torturing Jose Rizal's brother Pasiano, but was unsuccessful. They later on gave up on Pasiano, who was rendered insensible to sign the confession which would implicate Rizal. There was no trained counsel allowed to defend Rizal, the arguments dubbed absurd by Craig in 2005. That he did not merit it worthwhile of discussion. Rizal's case was brazenly unfair and would have caused worldwide indignation, but Manila was far too remote and heavy censorship during those times for the facts to have become known. So did Rizal write a retraction letter? To this day, scholars have yet to prove once and for all the authenticity of Rizal's retraction document. This alleged letter was mass redistributed and printed in Spain as early as 1907. This debated document was allegedly signed by Rizal moments before his death, with many and mostly Jesuit witnesses. Many academics argue that the letter was mere propaganda invented by the friars to discredit Rizal's act of heroism and criticism of the actions by the Catholic Church and Spanish rule. The retraction letter was signed by Rizal along with Senor Fresno, chief of the picket, and Senor Mure, adjutant of the plaza, from Chua. So, what was the content of the retraction letter perceived to be written by Rizal? The letter contained Rizal's retraction of whatever, quote, word, writings, publications, and conduct he has made against the Catholic Church. Included is a testament that he will be dying a Catholic along with the alleged condemnation of Freemasonry. So, what is the content of his works that caught the ire of Spain? Rizal's work and social theory caught the ire of Spain as he was blatant in his dissent toward the Spanish colonial government and the church. According to Rizal, as summarized in Alatas in 2017, Rizal's writings were concerned about the nature and state of the colonial society. This did not paint the Spanish government in a good light. According to Rizal, the Spanish colonial bureaucracy was corrupt and the Catholic Church harshly took advantage of the Filipinos. Rizal's work opposed the colonial knowledge that the Filipinos were indolent or lazy, instead argued that this belief was unfounded and rather a result of colonialism. Rizal studied the pre-colonial Philippines and countered the thought that, than indolent, the Philippines was relatively advanced society. During the pre-colonial times, thus weakening colonizers' dominant ideology. A recurring theme in Rizal's work is the backwardness of the clergy featured in Noli Me Tangere, where he criticized the government for allowing corruption. Rizal's work implicated that the church as corrupt and pretentious, which damaged the reputation of the church who capitalized on salvation anxiety of the believers. Rizal's scathing work on exposing the nature of the church and the Spanish government, alongside with his views on freedom and emancipation undoubtedly caught the ire of Spain, who preferred subservient and oblivious Filipinos. So according to Constantino in 1972, the works of Rizal might have helped the maturation of the liberation struggle, which is antithetical for Spain, who was losing grip to the Philippine colony as the globe was experiencing a massive economic change that challenged previous schools of thought and belief system. So how was Rizal martyred and when did it happen? Rizal was martyred through a firing squad shooting him in the back on December 30, 1896 at 7 in the morning, according to Filipinos Heritage Library. Before the execution took place, at 6:30 in the morning, Rizal began to march his way from Fort Santiago, where he was prisoned, to Bagumbayan, now known as Luneta, where he would be executed. Alongside him were Lieutenant Taviel de Andrade and the priest Father Estanislao March and Father Jose Villaclara, and were and they were walking behind four advance guard carrying bayonets. He was wearing a black suit with white vest, and his right hand was holding a rosary. His elbows were tied, according to historical accounts. Out of the firing squad selected Spanish authorities, 6 to 8 of them were Filipino troops. Standing behind the firing squad was another set of peninsular troops, just in case Filipino troops choose to withdraw, which is according to Kintindig in 2010. Rizal declined to be blindfolded and demanded to have him face his executioners. However, this request was turned down. His reason was to show that he never betrayed and he was ready to face death for the Philippines. The captain of the squad instructed him to have him shot in the back. So Rizal had to turn his back from the firing squad. Before the firing took place, an order was given to the firing squad through drum beats playing in unison. When Rizal heard the commander of squad shout fuego, which means fire, he changed his position facing the firing squad. When the shots were fired, Rizal fell on the ground facing the sky and saw the break of dawn. He then said his last word, consumat, consummatum est, which means it is finished, which is according to Katindig in 2010. He died at 7:03 in the morning. Afterwards, this crowd of Spaniards were screaming at words, "Long live Spain, death to traitors." According to Adolfo Pastor Picotti, who was descendant of one of the members of the firing squad, only one of the rifles had live bullet while the other were blanks. This was to relieve the members of the firing squad who felt guilt and who were aware of Rizal's innocence. After Rizal was shot, a soldier fired a last shot to his head to make sure he was really dead. His corpse was buried in an unmarked grave by Spanish authorities, according to Chambers, at the Paco Cemetery, according to Tan, and when his grave was found by his sisters, they persuaded the guards to have his initials RPJ marked on it so the Spanish couldn't find it, according to Elliot in 2018. So that ends our report. Thank you very much for listening.